The garage door didn't respond. My key scraped uselessly in the front lock. Clara Mae's voice, muffled but clear, came through the door. "I changed everything, Dale. You're not welcome here anymore." Then the papers, slick and white, from the server. A police officer stood by, arms crossed, watching me. My home, my life, stripped bare on the curb. She smirked, a faint, chilling curve of her lips. The flight from Charlotte had been on time. The taxi ride from Sacramento International was routine. The familiar scent of the Central Valley in the evening air. It was a Monday, just after 6, and I looked forward to a quiet night, catching up on mail and preparing for the week ahead. My briefcase, containing a stack of reports and an uneaten airplane sandwich, felt heavier than usual as I stepped onto the driveway. I pressed the button on the garage door opener. Nothing. I tried again, closer this time, aiming directly at the sensor. The door remained steadfastly closed. A minor inconvenience, I thought. Probably a dead battery. I walked around to the front door, retrieved my house key, and inserted it into the lock. It wouldn't turn. The mechanism felt different, resistant, not seized but altered. I tried the spare key from my wallet. Same result. My breath caught, a cold, dry sensation. This was not a malfunction. I knocked. A light flickered on in the living room, visible through the shears. A moment later, Clara Mae's voice came, clear and level, from just behind the door. "Dale, you can't come in. I changed the locks, all of them, and the garage code." Her tone was neither angry nor apologetic, just factual, like relaying a weather report. Before I could formulate a response, a man in a rumpled suit stepped from behind the rose bushes near the porch. He held a thin stack of papers. "Dale Peterson?" he asked, his voice flat. I nodded, still processing Clara Mae's words. He handed me the documents, a petition for divorce and a temporary restraining order. A sheet on top specified that I was not to approach Clara Mae or the residence. My eyes skimmed the bold type. It cited irreconcilable differences and threats of emotional distress. I had made no such threats. A Sacramento County Sheriff's deputy, who had been leaning against a squad car parked discreetly down the street, now approached. He was a large man, impassive. "Mr. Peterson," he stated, "due to the restraining order, you need to vacate the premises immediately. If you attempt entry or refuse to leave, I will be forced to place you under arrest." He gestured vaguely toward the street. My briefcase was still in my hand, my car keys, my wallet, my phone. That was it. I walked to the curb, the papers heavy in my hand. The deputy watched until I was in the taxi I had called earlier. The driver, oblivious, asked where I was headed. "Motel," I said, the word tasting unfamiliar. I checked into a generic chain motel off Highway 50. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. The television hummed with an infomercial I didn't watch. I sat on the edge of the bed, the restraining order spread on the worn carpet, and stared at the beige wall. There was no sleep that night, just the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the unfamiliar silence of my own thoughts. The next morning, the first thing I did was access the joint bank account online. The balance was negligible, a few $100s. Clara Mae had systematically transferred everything out, checking and savings. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an operation. I left the motel, drove to a nearby mall, and bought 2 changes of clothes, a new toothbrush, and a razor. Appearances mattered. I needed to look presentable for work, and more urgently, for a lawyer. I found Walter Stone's office in an old brick building downtown, his name etched on a frosted glass door. Walter was a man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a direct manner. He listened without interruption as I laid out the events of the previous evening, placing the divorce papers and restraining order on his polished desk. "Mr. Peterson," Walter began, leaning back in his leather chair. "This isn't uncommon. The restraining order, the lock change, the emptying of accounts, it's a strategic maneuver. It puts you on the defensive immediately. It creates a narrative." He explained that while the divorce itself was irreversible once filed, the terms were negotiable. The restraining order, however, was a more immediate problem. "We'll challenge it, but it's an uphill battle once it's in place. It implies fault, regardless of the truth." Walter outlined the realities. the division of assets, potential spousal support, the legal costs. It was a cold, transactional overview of the dismantling of a life. You'll need more than legal representation, Walter concluded, his gaze firm. You'll need to understand why this was done this way and what she's building against you. I recommend Trent Stone at Sacramento Confidential Investigations. He handles these situations. He's good at finding the unseen currents. I called Trent Stone from Walter's office, arranging to meet him later that afternoon. Trent was younger than Walter, sharper, with an intensity behind his eyes. He sat opposite me, hands clasped on his desk. Clara Mae's actions, Trent explained, are designed for public perception, Mr. Peterson. The restraining order paints you as a threat. The sudden nature of it makes you look like a monster. It's about controlling the narrative, shaping how people, and eventually a judge, see you. He paused, letting that sink in. We need to understand her narrative, and then we need to counter it. Logically, factually. The office felt different, colder. I'd spent the previous night in the motel again, the temporary restraining order, a constant pressure in my briefcase. I walked into the marketing department, nodded to my colleagues. Their greetings felt forced, their glances too quick. Esther Gable, my division head, called me into her office shortly after I sat down. She was a woman who valued efficiency above all else, her desk meticulously organized. "Dale," she began, her voice modulated, her expression neutral. "I understand you're going through a difficult personal situation." She paused, her gaze steady. "While we sympathize, we also need to ensure there are no disruptions to your work or the team. Any legal matters are to be handled discreetly and outside of office hours." She picked up a pen, twirled it between her fingers. "I trust you understand the implications." It was a warning delivered with a professional smile that my personal life was now a professional liability. Later that afternoon, my phone vibrated with a call from Trent Stone. His voice was calm, businesslike. "Mr. Peterson, I have some initial observations from the surveillance we set up at your residence." He asked if I had a secure connection, and I confirmed I was in my car, parked far from the office building. "I'm sending a link to a private server. You'll need the password I just texted you." I opened the link on my phone. The screen flickered, then showed a time-stamped video feed of my driveway. It was from the Tuesday morning, the day after I'd been locked out. The image was clear, even on the small screen. My garage door stood closed. Then a silver BMW i8, low-slung and expensive, pulled into the frame. It stopped. The garage door began to ascend, slowly, silently. The BMW drove in. The door closed. The timestamp read 8:17 a.m. "This vehicle," Trent's voice came through the phone, "is not registered to Clara Mae, nor have we observed it there previously during your residency. The garage door opened using a new code, one you clearly wouldn't have known." He paused, letting the implications settle. He sent another video. This one was from the following afternoon, Wednesday, just past 2 p.m. The same silver BMW i8 backed out of my garage. It paused at the end of the driveway, then turned left and drove away. The garage door closed. "We ran the license plate," Trent continued. "Through a contact at the DMV, we've identified the owner, a Mr. Arthur Briggs. He's a resident of Folsom, California." The name hit me with a dull thud. Arthur Briggs. The name was familiar. Clara Mae had mentioned him. He was one of the newer hires at her ad agency, a junior account manager, I thought. She'd dismissed him as a bit too eager, too flashy, Bahar. That assessment, I now understood, was profoundly incorrect. "We have footage confirming this vehicle has been entering and leaving your property multiple times over the last 6 months, Trent stated, his voice devoid of judgment, just stating facts. "Often after you had left for business trips or late at night. The pattern started shortly after you took on that new project in Charlotte that required extended travel." The silence on the line stretched. 6 months. The thought unfolded in my mind, a slow, methodical unraveling of what I had believed to be true. It wasn't just a recent development, not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This had been planned meticulously. "Mr. Peterson," Trent broke the silence, "it's imperative you do not confront Mr. Briggs. Any direct interaction could be interpreted as a violation of the restraining order. even if he's not named in it. It could also play into Clara Mae's narrative, painting you as volatile or aggressive. What do I do then? I asked, the question thin, almost a whisper. We continue to gather evidence, Trent replied. We build a complete picture. We need to document everything systematically, her actions, his involvement, the timing. This isn't about emotion, Mr. Peterson. It's about facts. It's about building a case she can't easily dismiss. We understand her strategy. Now we counter it logically. Trent's office was functional, devoid of personal touches. He led me to a smaller room, equally Spartan, where a woman sat hunched over 3 glowing monitors. This was Doris Miller, the agency's IT specialist. She was younger than Trent, with sharp, observant eyes and an economy of movement that spoke of focused work. Doris, Trent said, this is Dale Peterson. Doris will walk you through how we approach digital investigations. Legally, of course. Doris nodded, her gaze briefly meeting mine before returning to her screens. Mr. Peterson, she began, her voice calm and clear. People leave digital footprints everywhere. Our job is to find them, analyze them, and piece together a coherent picture. We don't break laws. We look for what's publicly accessible or what can be lawfully obtained with proper authorization. She turned one of her monitors slightly. We start with social media. Even with privacy settings, people often forget what they've made public in the past. We look for historical posts, tagged photos, connections, comments, likes, shared interests, anything that establishes patterns of behavior or associations. Sometimes, even what isn't posted can be telling, especially if it deviates from established online habits. She brought up a few public profiles, not Clara Mae's, but as examples showing how threads of information could be pulled from disparate sources. We've also noted indications that Clara Mae uses a secondary phone, Doris continued, her fingers moving quickly across her keyboard. A burner, as it's often called. She uses it for discrete communications. We've found a few traces, a new unfamiliar number linked to a recently created, non-identifiable email account, and some brief, out-of-pattern spikes in data usage on her primary carrier records that don't correspond to her main device's activity. How do you track something like that without direct access? I asked, watching her. We don't track it live in the traditional sense, Doris clarified. That would be illegal. What we do is look for its digital echoes. If she's using it to access public Wi-Fi, it leaves a data trail. If she's communicating with someone who doesn't practice similar discretion, their digital footprint might expose hers. We correlate its appearance or disappearance with known events like Arthur Briggs' visits. We look for patterns. For instance, if Arthur's phone is observed in a particular location and a secondary unknown number associated with a Clara Mae appears on a cell tower log in the vicinity during that same time, that's a data point. Data by deities. It's about building a web of circumstantial evidence, not intercepting messages. While Doris spoke, my mind went to the bank accounts. She also opened a separate bank account. I stated more to myself than to them. I found it when I was trying to reconstruct our finances. A small account recently opened with some unusual deposits. Trent leaned forward. That fits the pattern. We've been reviewing your joint accounts. Clara Mae didn't just drain them overnight, Mr. Peterson. She systematically transferred funds out over the past 5 months. Smaller amounts at first, then larger, more frequent transfers. Always just under the threshold that might trigger an automatic bank alert to you. The pieces began to click into place. I remember, I said, she started making large cash withdrawals a few months ago. Said she needed it for household expenses or emergency funds. I never questioned it. She always handled the finances. Precisely, Trent affirmed. Those cash withdrawals are harder to trace directly. However, money leaves a trail, even cash. It has to go somewhere, payments, purchases, other accounts. We can subpoena bank records, trace the recipient accounts, examine her credit card statements for corresponding expenditures. We look for any large ticket items or investments that don't align with her declared income or your joint expenses, any significant movements of money outside of normal patterns. I looked at the screens, at Doris's focused expression, at Trent's steady gaze. The betrayal was no longer just an emotional blow. It was a carefully constructed financial and digital operation. Go ahead, I told Trent. Investigate everything. The finances, the phone, any other connections. Trent nodded. Doris and I will coordinate. We'll focus on establishing the timeline of the relationship with Mr. Briggs and the financial transfers. We'll look for any commingling of funds or direct payments that could indicate a deeper financial entanglement. The plan was logical, methodical, just facts. The financial reality of the situation set in quickly. My reduced salary, combined with the cost of the motel, legal fees, and now the investigation, put a severe strain on my liquid assets. I ate most meals at my desk or bought cheap takeout. The feeling of being cornered, both financially and legally, became a constant companion. The bills from Walter and Trent accumulated with a speed I hadn't anticipated. Trent's team, however, was productive. Over the next few weeks, reports and video files arrived regularly. The surveillance was thorough, precise. His operatives documented Clara Mae's movements with an almost scientific detachment. There were no grand pronouncements, just a steady stream of facts. The videos showed Clara Mae and Arthur Briggs. They met for lunch at various downtown restaurants, their demeanor relaxed, often laughing. They had coffee at the cafe near Clara Mae's office. On 2 separate evenings, they were seen entering a quiet bar in Midtown, staying for an hour or so before parting ways, usually with Arthur dropping Clara Mae off at our house. The frequency of these meetings established a clear pattern, far beyond what casual professional acquaintances would maintain. The surveillance also yielded evidence of financial interactions. On one video, Arthur was seen handing Clara Mae a small, velvet-covered box outside a jewelry store. Another time, she emerged from a high-end boutique carrying a distinctive designer shopping bag, Arthur walking a step behind her, his hand briefly touching her back as they exited. The gifts, while not directly proving financial commingling, painted a picture of Arthur providing for Clara Mae, which contrasted sharply with my suddenly barren bank accounts. Then came the significant development. A series of surveillance photos and videos showed Arthur Briggs and Clara Mae at a multi-unit building in East Sacramento. It was late on a Saturday afternoon. Arthur was carrying boxes from the back of his BMW, while Clara Mae unlocked the door to a ground-floor apartment. They spent several hours moving what appeared to be furniture and personal belongings into the unit. There were no moving trucks, just Arthur's car and a few large suitcases, suggesting a partial, discreet move. Trent's report identified the building's address. It was a well-maintained older apartment complex, far enough from our neighborhood to feel completely separate, yet close enough for convenience. Clara Mae had established a second residence and Arthur Briggs was actively assisting her. The evidence was accumulating. I had a file now, thick with documentation. It laid out the affair, the financial maneuvering, the secret apartment. My next move was less about legal strategy and more about psychological leverage. I considered who might have influence over Clara Mae. Her mother, Beth, came to mind. Clara Mae had always, despite their occasional disagreements, cared deeply about her mother's opinion. Beth, a woman of firm, traditional values, would not condone an affair, especially one carried out with such deception. I called Beth on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was warm, accustomed to my calls. "Dale, everything all right? You sound a little strained." "Beth," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I need to talk to you about Clara Mae. It's serious. It's not something I can discuss over the phone, really." She agreed to meet for coffee the next morning. Beth arrived promptly, her usual composed self. We sat at a corner table in a quiet cafe. I laid out the facts, not as accusations, but as a series of observations. I spoke of the divorce papers, the restraining order, the drained accounts. Then I pulled out a few carefully selected photos. Arthur Briggs' BMW entering my garage, Arthur and Clara Mae having dinner, Arthur carrying boxes into the East Sacramento apartment. I showed her the lease agreement Trent had managed to obtain, showing Clara Mae's name. Beth listened, her expression moving from concern to disbelief, then to a tight, controlled anger. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara Mae wouldn't do something like this. Not with another man. Not like this." She tapped a finger on one of the photos, a slight tremble in her hand. "This isn't right." "Beth, I have the evidence," I stated, keeping my voice even. "I wouldn't bring this to you if I wasn't absolutely certain. The apartment, the man, the money, it's all there." She stared at the photo of Arthur carrying a box. A long minute passed. Then she looked up, her eyes hard. "Where is this apartment?" she asked. "I want to see it. I want to talk to her, face to face about this. I need to know the truth from her." I gave her the address. Beth stood up, her jaw set. "I'll go there this afternoon," she announced. "I'll make sure she's there. She needs to explain this." Her disapproval was palpable, a quiet fury that resonated with my own. I waited. The clock on my motel room wall seemed to tick louder than usual. My phone sat on the nightstand. I tried to focus on a book, but the words blurred. Just past 3 o'clock, the phone rang. It was Beth. Her voice was tight, strained. "Dale, it's true. He's here. Arthur Briggs. He's in her apartment." Her anger was simmering just beneath the surface, a stark contrast to her usual composed demeanor. "They're together. I needed to see it for myself." "Thank you, Beth," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline starting to course through me. "I'll be there shortly." I immediately called Trent Stone. "It's confirmed," I told him. "Beth just called. Briggs is at the apartment with Clara Mae." Trent's response was immediate and practical. "All right, Mr. Peterson, we need to act now. It's crucial we document this. I'm already on my way. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Do not approach the apartment until I arrive. We need to ensure we have every angle covered for the recording." I drove to the address Trent had provided, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My mind was clear, focused. This was not about emotion now. It was about evidence, about finally dismantling the deception. I saw Trent's discreet surveillance van parked a block away when I arrived. He was already out, adjusting a small, almost invisible camera clipped to his jacket lapel. He carried another larger device, tucked away in a messenger bag. "All right, Mr. Peterson," Trent said, his voice low. "I've got the recording devices active. We proceed calmly. No threats, no raised voices from your end. Just state your purpose. Let them incriminate themselves with their reactions." We walked toward the apartment building. Beth was standing near a small, decorative fountain in the courtyard, her face pale, her arms crossed. When she saw me, she gave a small, resolute nod. "Clara Mae," Beth called out as we approached the door, her voice still strained but audible. "I need to speak with you again." A moment later, the door opened. Clara Mae stood there, her eyes wide with surprise, then annoyance as she saw me with Trent. Arthur Briggs was visible just behind her, buttoning his shirt. His eyes widened too, a deer-in-headlights look. The domestic scene exposed. "Dale?" Clara Mae said, a forced lightness in her tone. "What are you doing here? You know about the restraining order." "I know all about it, Clara Mae," I replied, my voice calm, level. "And I know all about this." I gestured vaguely at the apartment, then at Arthur. And him. Arthur Briggs tried to sidestep past Clara Mae, a quick movement toward the open door. "I should go," he muttered, his gaze darting nervously. Trent Stone stepped forward, blocking Arthur's path. "Mr. Briggs, you're not going anywhere just yet. Not until we've had a word." His tone was firm, authoritative, leaving no room for argument. Clara Mae's face hardened. "This is ridiculous, Dale. What are you talking about? Arthur is just a colleague. We were having coffee." Her eyes flickered to her mother, who stood silent, watching. "Coffee?" I asked, a slight lift in my voice, devoid of humor. "In your secret apartment? With your mother as a witness? And your car keys, wallet, and phone in his apartment? Or mine, I suppose?" Trent then spoke, his voice clear. "Clara Mae, Arthur, you should know that this entire conversation is being recorded. Every word, every reaction. We have also documented Mr. Briggs's silver BMW i8 entering and leaving Mr. Peterson's garage over the last 6 months. We have documented the movement of funds from your joint accounts, Clara Mae, into newly opened accounts under your name. We have detailed records of the lease for this apartment, secured in your name, and we have numerous other pieces of evidence connecting the two of you right up to the moment Mr. Briggs was seen helping you move belongings into this unit." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Arthur Briggs stood frozen, his face ashen. Clara Mae's jaw tightened. The bravado, the feigned ignorance, evaporated. "We have everything," Trent reiterated. "There will be no more denials, no more playing innocent. The charade is over." I looked directly at Clara Mae. "I came here for confirmation. You've given it. Consider this a notice. The divorce will proceed, and it will proceed with every piece of evidence we've collected, every transaction, every meeting, every detail. I paused, allowing the gravity of my statement to sink in. Some choices come with a heavy cost. You'll soon find out just how heavy. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. After the confrontation at the apartment, I moved out of the motel. Trent had located a furnished rental unit for me, a small, practical place not far from my office. It was less anonymous than the motel, but still felt detached from the life I once knew. It was a temporary space, a holding pattern. Walter Stone wasted no time. With the photographic and video evidence in Beth's testimony, he immediately filed motions. The restraining order against me was challenged, the evidence of Clara Mae's deceit directly contradicting her claims. More critically, he filed for a freeze on her newly discovered bank account and any other assets she had independently acquired or transferred. The goal was to prevent further dissipation of marital funds and secure any ill-gotten gains. Doris Miller, meanwhile, was diligently sifting through Clara Mae's digital footprint and financial records. The information from the confrontation gave her new avenues to pursue. Clara Mae had always maintained a small, freelance art business on the side, selling occasional pieces to what she called her clients. It had never been a major source of income, mostly a hobby, or so I believed. Doris's report, however, painted a different picture. Mr. Peterson, she explained during a conference call, we found significant discrepancies in Clara Mae's freelance business. The income she reported, especially in the last 6 months, doesn't match up to her typical output or market rates. The clients listed on her invoices, they're either non-existent or their contact information leads to dead ends. The implications slowly dawned on me. Are you saying these invoices were fabricated? Precisely, Doris confirmed. The payments into her separate account from these clients are substantial. Too substantial for the volume of work. It appears she created a paper trail to legitimize transfers, likely from the funds she siphoned from your joint accounts, or potentially from Arthur Briggs. Trent's team then went to work confirming these findings. They attempted to contact the listed clients. Some addresses were vacant lots. Other phone numbers were disconnected. A few led to individuals who, when discreetly questioned, denied ever commissioning art from Clara Mae. It was a clear pattern of fabricated income, a deliberate attempt to obscure the origin of funds. A cold dread settled over me when I recalled conversations with Beth. Clara Mae had always been close with her mother, and I remembered Beth expressing pride in Clara Mae's burgeoning art business, mentioning how some of her friends had bought a piece or two from Clara Mae. It was a small detail I'd never thought twice about. Now the realization hit me. Clara Mae had likely roped her own mother unwittingly into her scheme. Beth, with her desire to support her daughter, would have mentioned her art business to friends, perhaps even encouraging them to pretend they had purchased something, or provided their names for a fictitious client list, never understanding the larger deception. It was a betrayal that reached beyond me, touching the very people she claimed to love. Walter Stone, upon receiving Doris's and Trent's detailed reports, moved swiftly. He amended the divorce petition, adding formal allegations of financial fraud. This escalated the entire legal process. No longer was it just a marital dissolution. It was a case involving criminal deception. The court responded with an immediate order for a full disclosure of assets from both Clara Mae and Arthur Briggs. This was a crucial step. It would force them to reveal the true extent of their financial entanglements and any hidden assets. The legal net was tightening. Trent also discreetly ensured that Arthur Briggs's employer, a prominent advertising agency, was made aware of his involvement. He phrased it carefully, presenting only the facts of Arthur's complicity in the fraudulent invoices and the misuse of company resources, if any, during work hours for personal endeavors, without directly accusing him of theft. The agency initiated an internal investigation. The information, presented with objective evidence, was enough to trigger their corporate compliance protocols. Arthur Briggs was now facing potential termination, a professional reckoning for his choices. I began preparing for a legal battle that was far more complex than I had initially imagined. It wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about exposing a calculated deception and seeking financial recompense for the fraud. Marital fault, which in California usually doesn't impact asset division, now became a significant factor due to the financial misconduct. The calm, logical approach was yielding results, uncovering a deeper web of deceit. The initial court hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. The courtroom was sterile, functional, filled with a low hum of conversation. Clara Mae arrived with her attorney, Ms. Jenkins, a sharp-faced woman with an aggressive air. Clara Mae wore a conservative navy suit, her expression carefully neutral. She avoided my gaze. Walter Stone, calm and collected, stood beside me. When our case was called, he addressed Judge Hammond, a stoic woman with wire-rimmed glasses who listened with an almost unsettling patience. Walter systematically presented the initial evidence: the video surveillance of Arthur Briggs's car at my house, the documentation of the secret apartment, the financial transfers from our joint account to Clara Mae's new, undisclosed account, and Beth's sworn statement regarding the confrontation. He concluded by challenging the validity of the temporary restraining order, citing its malicious intent given Clara Mae's documented deception. Judge Hammond reviewed the documents, her eyes scanning the reports. She peered over her glasses, first at Clara Mae, then at me. "Ms. Jenkins," she stated, her voice quiet but firm, "the evidence presented by Mr. Stone raises serious questions regarding the initial claims in your client's petition, particularly concerning the alleged threats and the need for a restraining order. This court will be reviewing the restraining order's validity in light of these new facts." The shift in her tone was palpable. The court was no longer taking Clara Mae's claims at face value. Despite the growing mountain of evidence, Clara Mae, under Miss Jenkins's whispered advice, maintained her innocence. "My client denies any infidelity or financial impropriety, Your Honor," Ms. Jenkins stated, her voice clear. "These are baseless accusations intended to tarnish her reputation." Walter then moved to the next phase. He filed a formal motion to depose Arthur Briggs and subpoena his comprehensive financial records. Given Arthur's direct involvement in the financial fraud allegations, the court granted the motion without hesitation. Arthur Briggs was compelled to give a deposition a week later. It was a closed-door session, but Walter relayed the details. Arthur, facing the threat of both a civil lawsuit and potential criminal charges for his role in the financial scheme, cooperated. He revealed the full extent of his affair with Clara Mae, detailing when it began, their meetings, and his knowledge of the secret apartment. More critically, he admitted to providing Clara Mae with financial assistance, framing it as loans, but acknowledging it covered expenses for her new apartment and living costs. He also reluctantly confirmed his awareness of the freelance art business as a means for Clara Mae to manage funds discreetly. His testimony was a crucial piece, directly implicating Clara Mae and substantiating the fraud. Doris Miller, true to her expertise, provided her expert testimony in a subsequent hearing. She presented a meticulous breakdown of the digital evidence, the burner phone's activity patterns, correlating with Arthur's whereabouts, the fabricated invoices, and the paper trail of the funds moving from the joint account to Clara Mae's personal account. Her presentation was factual, precise, leaving little room for doubt. She showed how the digital breadcrumbs confirmed a deliberate, long-term pattern of deception. Given the financial strain I was under, the court, recognizing the frozen assets, granted a motion to provide me with temporary access to limited funds. It was enough for basic living expenses, a temporary relief from the tight financial corner Clara Mae had put me in. Ms. Jenkins, Clara Mae's attorney, made an attempt to discredit Trent Stone's surveillance methods, arguing they were invasive and potentially illegal. She questioned the legality of hidden cameras and the collection of digital data. However, Trent, under oath, calmly explained the legal parameters he operated within. He detailed how all surveillance was conducted in public spaces or on property where no reasonable expectation of privacy existed, and how all digital evidence was obtained through lawful means or publicly available information. His testimony was unflappable, and Ms. Jenkins' attempt to undermine his work failed. The initial hearings concluded with Judge Hammond scheduling a full evidentiary hearing. This was where the full weight of the collected evidence would be presented. The case had shifted dramatically. What began as a simple divorce petition filed under false pretenses, was now a serious legal battle focusing on infidelity, asset concealment, and outright financial fraud. The legal journey was long, but the path was clear. The full evidentiary hearing began with Beth, Clara Mae's mother, on the stand. She looked smaller, older, as she took the oath. Her testimony was delivered with a quiet, heartbreaking sincerity. She expressed profound regret for her unwitting involvement in Clara Mae's scheme, explaining how her daughter had used her and her friends' names for the fictitious art sales. "I just wanted to help her," Beth said, her voice catching. "I had no idea. I believed her." Beth then detailed conversations with Clara Mae over the past year. Clara Mae had spoken of wanting a fresh start, a life free of the constraints she felt in our marriage. She had mentioned saving money, building a nest egg, and planning to leave. Beth had assumed this meant a peaceful separation, not a calculated deception. Her testimony painted a clear picture of Clara Mae's long-term planning, confirming the deliberate nature of the affair and the financial maneuvers. Following Beth, a team of forensic accountants presented their comprehensive report on Clara Mae's freelance art business and the movement of funds. Their presentation was methodical, replete with charts and graphs detailing every transaction. They confirmed Clara Mae's systematic embezzlement of marital funds, showing how money was transferred from joint accounts, laundered through the fictitious art sales, and deposited into her secret account. The report documented hundreds of thousands of dollars, far more than I had initially suspected. It was a cold, hard summary of financial betrayal. When Clara Mae took the stand, Ms. Jenkins attempted damage control. Clara Mae stuck to her story of irreconcilable differences and denied the financial fraud, claiming the money was for legitimate investments and personal savings. She maintained that Arthur Briggs was merely a friend and colleague. However, Walter Stone's cross-examination was relentless. He meticulously picked apart her statements, pointing out inconsistencies between her current testimony and previous affidavits, and directly contradicting her claims with the surveillance videos, Beth's testimony, and the forensic accounting report. He brought up specific dates, specific transactions, specific meetings with Arthur Briggs. Each denial was met with irrefutable evidence. The pressure mounted. Clara Mae, usually composed, began to falter. Her voice wavered. She stumbled over answers. The calm facade cracked. Finally, under the weight of the undeniable facts, she broke down. Her confession was quiet, almost a whisper, as she admitted to the affair with Arthur Briggs, to planning to leave me, and to orchestrating the financial deception to secure her new life. The courtroom fell silent, the gravity of her words hanging in the air. Following her confession, Arthur Briggs' deposition was formally read into the court record. His admissions corroborated Clara Mae's confession, detailing the affair and her financial motives. He confirmed his assistance in moving funds and establishing the secret apartment, painting himself as an unwilling participant, but his testimony nonetheless solidified the narrative of their shared deceit. Judge Hammond listened to everything, her expression unreadable until the very end. Then she addressed both legal teams. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, she stated, her voice resonating through the quiet courtroom, including the testimony, forensic reports, and Mrs. Peterson's own confession, this court finds a strong likelihood of marital fault on the part of Clara Mae Peterson. The pattern of deception and financial fraud is clear. This was a significant finding directly impacting the division of assets. The court then moved to deliberate the division of assets, now fundamentally altered by the established fraud. Walter immediately requested full restitution for the embezzled funds and a substantial portion of the remaining marital estate to compensate for the emotional and financial damage. In a final definitive move, Judge Hammond officially lifted the restraining order against me. "Mr. Peterson," she announced, "the court finds no basis for the continuation of this order. It was obtained under false pretenses and is hereby vacated." The weight of that order, which had hung over me like a shadow, finally lifted. The truth, methodically uncovered, had set me free from that specific legal constraint. The financial reckoning, however, was just beginning. The final judgment arrived 3 weeks after the evidentiary hearing. Judge Hammond delivered her decision with the same composed gravity that had marked her presence throughout the proceedings. Her voice was steady, her words precise. This court finds Clara Mae Peterson guilty of marital misconduct, specifically engaging in an extramarital affair and committing financial fraud by systematically embezzling marital funds. The finding was definitive, leaving no ambiguity. The judgment laid out the financial repercussions. Clara Mae was ordered to return all fraudulently acquired funds to me, a substantial sum that included the money siphoned from our joint accounts and the proceeds from her fictitious art business. The court further ordered that a significant portion of Clara Mae's future earnings would be garnished to ensure this repayment. It was a long-term commitment, a constant reminder of her actions. Her share of the remaining marital assets was substantially reduced, reflecting her deliberate financial misconduct and the costs incurred by the investigation and legal proceedings. What she had sought to gain through deceit, she now stood to lose, and then some. The professional consequences for Arthur Briggs were swift. His employer, after their internal investigation, terminated his employment. The evidence presented in court had solidified their decision. The legal action against him, primarily for his role in facilitating the financial fraud, was still pending, but his career in advertising was effectively over. His reputation, once polished, was now stained. I sat in Walter Stone's office, reviewing the detailed judgment. The process had been arduous, a methodical uncovering of layers of deceit. There was no joy in the victory, only a quiet understanding of finality. My marriage, which I had once believed to be a stable foundation, was now officially and thoroughly dismantled. The legal documents in front of me were the concrete evidence of its termination, a paper monument to betrayal. The task of rebuilding began immediately. The temporary rental unit no longer felt quite so temporary. I started to furnish it with items that were mine alone, no longer negotiating shared tastes or past associations. I reestablished my personal bank accounts, diligently monitoring them. The financial stability, once eroded, would be a slow, careful process to restore. My career, thankfully, had remained secure despite Esther Gable's early warnings. The methodical presentation of facts had, in the end, insulated me from the fallout. Clara Mae, I heard through oblique channels, was struggling. The garnishments meant a significant reduction in her disposable income. The apartment she had so eagerly moved into was likely a source of financial strain. The social circle she had cultivated, or that had revolved around her and Arthur Briggs, had thinned. The consequences of her choices were now public, undeniable. Her planned new life, built on deception, was proving to be significantly less appealing than she had envisioned. The easy path she had sought had led to a far harder reality. I often thought about the methodical nature of the investigation. Each piece of evidence, each recorded conversation, each financial transaction had contributed to this outcome. It was a cold, logical process, devoid of the emotional outbursts and dramatic confrontations one might expect from such circumstances. Yet, the moral tension had been ever present, simmering beneath the surface of facts and figures. The system, once engaged, had delivered a clear moral and legal reckoning. There was a sense of justice, delivered not by rage, but by the relentless pursuit of truth. The harsh realities of betrayal, once felt as a shock, had been systematically exposed, quantified, and ultimately judged. The profound consequences of Clara Mae's betrayal rippled far beyond the courtroom. She lost not only the marriage, but also her financial autonomy, her professional standing, and, critically, her mother's respect. Her carefully constructed future, designed for ease and illicit pleasure, crumbled under the weight of meticulously gathered evidence. Arthur Briggs, her accomplice, saw his career destroyed, a public shaming that served as a stark warning about the price of complicity. For me, the trauma of betrayal faded, replaced by the quiet, methodical work of rebuilding. The marriage ended not with a whimper, but with a precise, factual indictment of deception, leaving a lasting testament to the enduring, costly choices people make. The profound consequences of Clara Mae's betrayal rippled far beyond the courtroom. She lost not only the marriage, but also her financial autonomy, her professional standing, and critically, her mother's respect. Her carefully constructed future, designed for ease and illicit pleasure, crumbled under the weight of meticulously gathered evidence. Arthur Briggs, her accomplice, saw his career destroyed, a public shaming that served as a stark warning about the price of complicity. For me, the trauma of betrayal faded, replaced by the quiet, methodical work of rebuilding. The marriage ended not with a whimper, but with a precise, factual indictment of deception, leaving a lasting testament to the enduring, costly choices people make.